Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip Hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week, including 50 years of hip hop. Big shout out first and foremost to the producers of this podcast, the people that support this podcast through donations at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to become a producer and get your name called on this podcast and also, get a bonus episode that you give me the topic to do, visit the link in the description, patreon.com/hiphopnow. 50 years of hip hop, y'all know what it is. And with Hip Hop Now Podcast, what I'm doing this year is no different from what I've done from every year, right? But especially with 50 years of hip hop, I did a whole 2 hours and 20 minutes with two guests, one being Tony from IntoTheDome.com. You may know him as my partner in rhyme on the podcast That Time in Hip Hop, as well as Yintz from my other podcast, Hip Hop Twitter. We did 50 years of hip hop, 2 hours and 20 minutes, starting from the early days all the way up until now, and also talking about where we think hip hop is going in the future. If that sounds interesting to you, you can watch the video on YouTube by subscribing to this here channel at Hip Hop Now Podcast, or you could just search for it on YouTube. But also, if you just dig the audio and you like to, work out and listen, or clean the house and listen, or drive to and from work, whatever fits you well, it is also available in audio form. But in celebration of 50 years of hip hop, it's more, right? So it's the final season of the Wu-Tang series, Wu-Tang, an American Saga, and it's the final season. And I felt like, you know what? I probably should have been reviewing this back during the first two seasons, but now since it's the final season and it's been a very good show, in my opinion, now I'm doing reviews of the final season with various guests. So episodes 1 through 3 are now available for review, and my guest on that episode was actor and comedian Javon Johnson. The link to that episode is in the description of this episode. Everything's down there, man. You can hit the links and just travel throughout. So support the content if you like it, by subscribing, liking, and leave a comment. I read all the comments. Occasionally I'll respond depending on, what it says, but nevertheless, it's for us. It's for us hip hop fans. You know what I mean? 50 years of hip hop. Now, big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, Ambrosia for Heads, djbooth.net, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business. LL Cool J and Q-Tip basically trolls social media about LL's new album. So let's rewind the tape a little bit. If you watched the Grammys, you saw there was like a celebration of 50 years of hip hop. Many MCs came out celebrating the different generations, including the GOAT LL Cool J. Don't debate me. I made a whole podcast episode about it. Go look it up. All the points are made there. But nevertheless, I remember after that performance and all the hype surrounding, and that was kind of like a real launching pad for people to be excited about 50 years of hip hop. Obviously, media and, everyone was going to commemorate this year, but it felt like that was the beginning, right? That kicked off just the vibe of hip hop content for 50 years of hip hop. LL announced via social media that his album, produced by Q-Tip, is coming out this year, or executive produced. I think it's produced, but also executive produced, which means essentially it's not like Q-Tip is doing all the beats. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe he is. But I'm assuming he's doing some beats and then he's the executive producer of it. So, it is what it is. But if it's just LL and Q-Tip, I'm extremely interested. But this was like after the Grammys. Yo, new album coming out this year, 50 Years of Hip Hop. Get ready. Then this week, and if you're from the future and the album's already out, you already heard it, you know what to do, man. Get your punk ass out of here. What you doing? You already know what's happening. But nevertheless, LL said something to the effect on social media that he wants the album to be right. It's not quite done yet. It's not ready for prime time. So I don't think it's going to be released this year. And then he turns around and says, I think he used the word psych, which is kind of annoying. But I mean, come on, man. The brother been around for a while in this game. It's LL. Come on, man. It's LL. All right. But nevertheless, it created a little bit of a conversation on social media. First, initially, with people talking about whether or not the album was good or should it come out, should he be working exclusively with Q-Tip, to him turning around and saying psych, and it is coming out, and people saying the opposite in some cases. But how do I feel about it? How do you feel about it? Leave your comments in the comment section below. But for me, personally, when I first heard about those two working together, because remember, if you're paying attention and you listen to Hip Hop Now podcast, it got to be like 2 to 3 years ago. Maybe more, but I would give it maybe 3, maybe 4 years ago. I remember, I think LL posted a picture of him in the studio and Q-Tip standing behind him. I think he was holding like a guitar or something like that, and was saying that they were working on his album. And we hadn't heard much about when it was coming out, if it was coming out. And LL hadn't had an album in a minute, like a while, and it wasn't great. Their last album was not good. I'm excited to hear what they cook up, given the fact that it's taken this long to say that it's going to come out, and to try to troll people to keep that momentum going. Because after the 50 Years of Hip Hop performance on the Grammys, LL used the momentum of that to announce the album. And then when it got a little bit quiet, right, he's on that Hot Ones challenge with the wings or whatever, and the clips are everywhere of that. And then he does this whole thing with the album. So he's got people talking about him, and then the whole thing with his son, which I'm really starting to feel like LL did that too. Like that dude just kind of looked like him. What's weird about the whole LL son thing is the dude is younger, but he looks like older LL, which shouldn't happen. He should look like younger LL, right? LL didn't look like how he looks now when he was younger, right? He looked different. But I think all of that is keeping LL's name in the news. So I think that album is coming relatively soon, or at least a single. The single is going to tell us what this album is. I'm thinking it's going to give us a vibe of what we may think this album may sound like. I could tell you like this, as a fan of Q-Tip's production and a fan of LL Cool J, because he's the GOAT, I'm optimistic, cautiously. I mean, let's keep it real. I mean, let's just say what it is. 50 Years of Hip Hop. So we bring and Keep It Real back. Q-Tip's production, as far as we know, there hasn't been anything recently that I know that's his production that I've went crazy over or felt like, yo, Q-Tip back, or that's that sound I remember. And LL hasn't had an album in years. And his last maybe 2 or 3 albums were not great. It really ended his run, his streak of putting out albums and at least having 2 to 3 hits on them, or a dope grimy posse cut. I think the break might have been good for him, right? Take a break away from the music and come back, survey the land, the hip hop landscape, and then come back and drop something. Now, I'm going to tell you like this, tell you what the pressure's on. It don't have to be King's disease, but it can't be no lower than any of those, which is saying the same thing. It just can't. It has to be LL, and it has to be, it can't be dated in sound and rhymes and all of that, but it has to be good, because Nas has set the bar for every old school artist that is going to attempt to drop something, especially a pairing between an MC, a legendary MC, and a legendary producer. Nas and Hit Boy currently have the market cornered. You know what I'm saying? And Nas is doing tonight. He's doing a concert in Madison Square Garden, a King's Disease joint. It's going to be crazy. So again, you cannot, and I'm talking to you, LL and Q-Tip, you cannot come out with something subpar when not only do you have the old school fans paying attention because of the pairing, but the whole Hot Ones thing and the fact that, LL is really extra. I think some young people will put on to him in a way where, they might press play on it. So it's just going to have to be, good. I mean, if it could be good and it doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be classic, it just can't be bad. And it can't be forgettable after a first listen. It just can't be. Here's a topic for you. Afro beats and podcasts. Are they killing hip hop? Now, I'm going to just keep it funky with y'all. I'm going to keep it 100. There's no way I could ever believe that podcasts are killing hip hop. But let's get to the origins of what this is even about. This is on hiphopdx.com. Shout out to them. And written by Ty St. Louis. I think that's the name. Shout out to them. The comment, here's what it says basically. Lil Duval sparked a debate over the weekend following the NBA All-Star Games All Afro Beats halftime show, which featured performances by Nigerian stars Burna Boy, Tim's, and Rima. The comedian took to Twitter on Sunday to share his thoughts in a series of posts. And here are some of those posts. Afro beats might be the death of hip hop as we know it. Afro beat. Okay, so this is something else. Okay, Lil Duval had immediately added to his original thought on Sunday with words in defense of Afrobeats. I wasn't saying hip hop is over. I said hip hop as we know it, meaning like evolved into something bigger, he clarified, meaning giving Afrobeats props. I don't know how some took offense. Well, there is one person that disagreed with him, and that's the Resurrector. Resurrected, zigzag, zigzag, all that, This is what he said. He basically dismissed the idea that the popularity of Afro beats is doing anything to hip hop at this point in time. He says Afrobeat is hip hop. They basically are doing their form of hip hop, just like trap was hip hop, just like G-Funk was hip hop. It's just their rendition. And you know what? They deserve a chance, just like the rest of us deserve a chance of our music to be heard around the world, inspire and feed families. Interesting. Now, let's get to the podcast part before I weigh in. Earlier this month, Duval had stated that he felt like podcasting was more relevant than music to the hip hop community. Wow. let's just get right into what this is and what this is about. Shout out to hiphopdx.com. Go read the entire article. I'm going to fold my hands hip hop style for this when I say it. Look, man, I agree with RZA. No branch of hip hop, whether it be trap, drill, whatever it may be, you can call Afro beats a branch or whatever. You can call it a branch of dancehall. You call dancehall a branch of hip hop, whatever, right? All on the same tree, all derived from the African American experience in diaspora. If you want to go there, if you want to be real about it. So I don't look at Afrobeat music as a death to hip hop. Now, it may I don't think it's going to take over in regards to hip hop because there's just way too many fans of this game that prefer traditional hip hop, right? Whereas others may love drill exclusively or trap exclusively or beats you can ride to exclusively or boom bap. Afrobeat is something different. It's something else. It's something else to try or prefer. But I could never see it taking over because I know there's some people who may think, well, trap music took over rap. But there's levels to it, right? How can trap music take over rap and cats like Griselda eat? Because they don't look broke at all. I mean, I know they rap about it, but they do not look broke, which means they're getting money also. Are they getting money on the same level as a trap rapper who's on the radio, all the time? No, but that's because that's what's most popular. But there are other parts of hip hop that are just as popular that, an artist can be heard, an artist can eat off of. So, no, it's 50 years of hip hop. Too many people are being reminded of the glory days of what hip hop means, of what it means today, of the different branches of hip hop. It's a celebration of it all. So I don't agree with that. Now, when it comes to podcasting, and y'all know I do this, and I don't see it as something people would prefer versus hip hop. I think it complements rap music and hip hop in general, right? Because two scenarios, a hip hop fan, right? Like you and me. Yo, I'm tuning into Hip Hop Now podcast to find out what's the word on the street, what's going on, what album is out, maybe what Vegas thinks about it. Maybe I've been on the fence about buying that album and listening to this podcast told me, sounds like something I would like. So to me, podcasting reinforces a person's love for hip hop. The other scenario is a person that just doesn't know anything and needs more than go buy this album or go buy that album. They need to know why should we care about any of these stories I'm talking about. Now, granted, what Little Duval is saying is not coming from podcasts like mine. My podcast is information based for the most part. No interviews for those who keep hitting me up. And that's why people are here. But the majority of hip hop podcasting, whether it's Math Hoffa's podcast or Joe Budden's podcast or Drink Champs or any of those podcasts, those are interview based, in some cases clickbait based, in some cases just deeper dives into the careers and the lifestyles and the thought processes of the hip hop artists you like or never heard of. So again, podcasting is reinforcing what we want to share about hip hop, what we want to know, who we want to hear from. It's all in support of the music at the end of the day. Give you a perfect example for myself before we move into the next story. But I remember I watch Drink Champs, but I don't watch every episode, and for damn sure I don't have 3 hours to throw away. Not that it'll be 3 hours of garbage, but there probably maybe 2 or 3 episodes where I watched it from beginning to end for like 2.5, 3 hours or whatever. But I remember the Mike Geronimo episode, and I tuned in because I hadn't seen Mike Geronimo in years, so I'm like, damn, well, what's good with him? Like, where is he in his life? And I was interested because if you rewind back, and I don't have the single back here, but I do still own the single for the Ish Is Real, right? His lead single. So, I was curious as a fan. And over the years, when he dropped his, debut album and even his follow-up, I never bought the albums. Not because I didn't like them, but just at the time, I was transitioning to college, and there was just a lot more on my radar around that time to be, trying to buy everything. But I remember watching it, right? And I was really locked in based off of what he was saying and what his life was like. It was a real passionate and to me revealing episode about somebody whose music, I always liked. Well, after that episode, it made me go and get the debut album, because I'm like, how do I not have this, right? But Mike Geronimo and that podcast made me do that. So you see what I'm saying? It's like podcasting done right can introduce you to an artist. It can reinforce your love for a specific artist. It can remind you, like it did me, of why you used to love that artist. Or it could turn you into a fan when you never was at one point, just because you're getting to know this person on a deeper level. So I feel like what Little Duval was saying in regards to podcasts was more so based in the controversy that comes out of some of these shows. But there's so many great points and shows and, examples of transparency with some of our favorite artists that, to me, just sort of reinforce why I like them or why I need to go press play on a stream or buy their music in the case of Mike Geronimo. So Little Duval, who is actually not a rapper, just come on, man, just be quiet. Just be quiet, dog. And lastly, Nas says that he is not inspired by his peers anymore. Well, he said inspired by rappers his own age, but that's his peers, for those that don't know what peers mean. And he said this when he was on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Let's see if we can get a quote. Nas says this: I'm really trying to figure out what my next move is. I feel like a lot of hip-hop artists my age are not putting out a lot of material, so I can't look to them as reference. They kind of slowed down for whatever reasons. I understand it's a tough thing, but I got bit by the bug, man. So I'll say this in response to Nas's comments. I don't blame him. There are artists that are his peers or his age that have released music, but just not on the level of King's Disease. And when you have this, and when I say that, I'm not talking about the bars aren't as nice or whatever. It's just as a total package, the music isn't nothing for him to look to the side and say they got the hip hop world on fire. That's not really happening. It didn't happen with AZ Do or Die 2. It even though Core Mega's joint was dope, it didn't really happen in that way. Nas's like projects with Hit Boy are beyond, the specific fandom, right? They're kind of growing his legend and his popularity. He's doing a show based off this album. This is Nas. He's doing a show based off of not this album, these series of albums, this King's Disease series. So, I get it, because there's no other artists around his age doing it. Now, I think 50 years of hip hop, we're going to get some records from some of the people around this time. And Black Thought doesn't count because it's a lot of EPs and, he kind of had his own rhythm going, and some people feel like, one project is better than the other, and blah blah blah. But what we don't want, because we know who's hot, right? But some of us hip hop fans do not like them and do not want him to look at Trap or Future or whoever, right, who's hot right now, to decide on what his next move is. I think what's more important there that stands out to me is there will not be a Nas and DJ Premier album for sure. Because him saying this, figure out what my next move is, and I can't really look to my peers because they're not really releasing like that. Why would he put out an album with DJ Premier? That, you might as well look to your peers when you're doing that. Doesn't mean he won't, but it just feels like he's looking to see, all right, I think the King's disease is will dry up. If I release another one, it will dry up. It was perfect, nice, perfect trilogy. Magic was like a perfect surprise. That's 4 projects. He's doing Madison Square Garden, the whole, King's disease. It's perfect to stop and let that be a moment in hip hop. His next thing, it has to be different. Now, it doesn't have to be different when it comes to beats and how he approached the beats and blah, 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 but it can't be King's disease. And it can't be, I'm Nas and blah, blah, blah. I think, and you're going to get this game for free, Nas. But I think that he should take his time. It's 50 years of hip hop. You and Hit Boy still somewhat eating off of this. The whole, Madison Square Garden thing. You can milk it during the 50th year of hip hop, and maybe you could tease something. But what I'm thinking, the only thing that he could do that would make people not compare it to King's disease unless it was trash is to do an album with Jay-Z. Now, make album, EP, something like that, right? Guest appearances, do a track with Premier, right? Get Kiss on a track with, get some new cat, do some 6 songs. Y'all feeling frisky, 10, but make sure you got some features because it might get a little whack. I don't know. But to me, that will stand outside of the King's Disease trilogy. But if you just drop another album and you just go back to working with different producers, or you even attempt to work with one, it's going to be compared. Now, if you say the Nas and Premier album is Nas, Jay-Z, and Premier, now you're talking, right? 50 years of hip hop, should have happened. I mean, get a Biggie verse that we just never heard, and I know they don't exist, but a Biggie verse we just never heard, and be Biggie, Jay-Z, and Nas, and have Premier scratch it up. You know what I mean? Like that. First of all, people would be beyond hyped, probably calling it classic before it dropped. Unfortunately, LL, you better put your stuff out first before they do something like that. You know what I mean? It would have to be something monumental to really get people to say, yo, this is huge just because it happened. The album doesn't even have to be a classic. It just has to be good. It just has to have some incredible music on there, and then put out a deluxe that has all of him and Jay-Z's collabos as bonuses. There you go, free game. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Vegas World INC, and you can like this podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can comment, right? What do you think about some of the things that was mentioned in this week's episode? Do you care about Afro beats? Do you care about Little Duval? Do you care about an LL Cool J album in 2023? Do you care where Nas goes next musically. Leave your comments in the comment section wherever you listen to this podcast. And most importantly, share it with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.